From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made last August in Rochester when a woman named Shay was listening to the radio. Shay is a grandmother who happened to be listening to an interview with Brian Lewis, the executive director of the Rock the Future Alliance. He was joined in that interview by the Rochester City School District's Director of Early Childhood Education, and they were talking about something that Shay probably didn't expect to hear. Shay's granddaughter has significant challenges, and at the age of 4, she wasn't able to use the bathroom on her own. And yet Shay listened to the guests explain that children don't need to be potty trained to attend pre-K. Shay's family story was featured in the forthcoming Rock the Future State of Our Children report card. We were able to review an advance copy before this conversation. Shay is quoted in the report as saying, quote, "They actually have professionals to help potty train your child. And I said, oh God, this is exactly what we need." End quote. Within a few days, that family was filling out paperwork to enroll Shay's granddaughter in pre-K. Shay later said, quote, "A lot of people are embarrassed about asking for help. Hearing Dr. Thomas and Mr. Lewis on the radio, it was like they were welcoming us with open arms. That gave us hope." End quote. The new report card from the Rock the Future Alliance offers some glimpses of success, stories like Shay's granddaughter, who is in a much better place now with her education. But the report card also offers some rather grim data on how many kids desperately need help of some kind. We're going to dig into the numbers this hour. Here's one. What percentage of Rochester 8th graders are proficient in math? It's 3.8% at the latest count, and that number has actually gone up a bit. As you heard yesterday on this program, 40% of Rochester's children live in poverty. Rock the Future has set a goal of putting 11,000 kids on a path to upward mobility. The report makes it undeniable that the pandemic took some steam out of the early efforts. In January of 2025, kids are struggling in many ways, but our guests have ideas about how to change that this hour. We are not only streaming where you expect to find us, I think, if you've been listening to Connections for years, but we are streaming on YouTube every day. It's nice to be on the WXXI News YouTube page, so if you're watching there, hello, you can join the chat there, and we'll have a lot of your feedback coming up this hour. Welcome to Brian Lewis, the Executive Director of the Rock the Future Alliance. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Evan.
Sebron Johnson is CEO of Edceptional. Sebron, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Evan.
Tell us what your organization does.
Well, Edceptional is a charter sector support organization that provides not only the common application for all the charter schools, but also help with literacy and training for those schools as well. And we do it in conjunction with partners.
Thank you for making the time for this program today. Janice Poor is with us in studio, co-chair of the Rock the Future Alliance's Parent Engagement Collaborative Action Network. Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And on the line with us is Dr. David E. Kirkland, a keynote speaker at the upcoming event on Friday this week. He's an author. The book that so many people have talked about is called A Search Past Silence, The Literacy of Young Black Men. Dr. Kirkland, thank you for being on the line with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to be talking about literacy. We're going to be talking about where those ELA numbers are. We're going to get into some of the numbers of the report card in just a moment here. Let me just back up a bit. You know, Brian, we talk every year now about this report card. And why don't you tell the community what the goal is of pulling this all together in the first place?
Yeah, so, the Maasai tribe have this greeting that they give to each other to say, how are the children? And the response to that is, all the children are well. And so this report card is not only a snapshot of where our children collectively are as a region, as Rochester, but it's also a guidepost. It has strategies, it has best practices, it has solutions that have been co-developed by system partners like Edceptional, but also by parents and youth in the community. And so we're both providing an assessment, but we're also trying to give some inspiration and make sure that folks understand that these are the things we need to do to partner, to work together, to make sure that our children achieve.
So I think part of my job is to be direct about where the numbers are and to talk to all of our guests about it, but also to provide a little bit of context. And some of that context is that there's no reasonable person who would look at where you've all started and think, well, that's about a 1-year project, or that's a 3-year goal, or that's even a 5-year goal. At the same time, what's realistic? I mean, because when we get into the numbers, listeners and viewers are going to hear them, and they're pretty grim at times. What's realistic for making the kind of achievements that you want to see?
Yes, it's really important, Evan. There's a discipline to this. It's a practice. We want a baseline where the numbers are now, and so our report card does that. But then we want to set ambitious but achievable goals. And we've also done that. And so when we do that as an alliance. We have our partners like Exceptional, like the YMCA of Greater Rochester, who also just joined us this year, but also city government, county government, and parents and youth as well, saying, we are not satisfied with where we are now. We want to put an additional 11,000, and that's the goal that we've landed on together, young people. And when we say that, what we mean is that's 11,000 young people that are kindergarten ready. That's 11,000 young people that are reading at grade level by third grade. That's 11,000 young people that are eighth grade math proficient. And so we're breaking it down, not just in terms of percentages, but also by the numbers. This is what we as Rochester need to do to make sure our children are achieving and having success.
Well, Janice, as a parent who is, the co-chair of the Rock the Future Alliance Parent Engagement Collaborative Action Network, it's a big job to try to link parents and families to the decision makers, to the structures here. And can you describe a little bit about how you're doing that and how you got involved in the first place?
Well, I would say the organizations and other partners are welcoming to parents' input and parent support. So that makes it easy. We do have a lot of motivated parents within the city who really want to see each and every one of our kids succeeding. And so when you have a platform that allows parents to come to the table and have a strong voice, and they're able to use that voice to make transformative change, it's easier for parents to come together, link together, and do the work that needs to be done.
Are you satisfied is the wrong word with where things are, but are you satisfied with the direction, with some of the ways that this alliance is working together towards this?
Maybe not the right word, but yes, we are motivated. And so to be able to have the support, I would say, it allows the parents to really come in and deep and dive into the work to really make that change. So yes, we are satisfied, but we're hopeful that we can strive each and every year to do better. And so as we're, going along the journey, our goal is to always push for more and more. And so having this number allow for us to see something that is attainable.
The official event that Rock the Future is hosting is on Friday. Is that right, Brian?
That's right, yeah.
It's on Friday. And so you have Dr. David E. Kirkland coming. In a moment, we're going to kind of dig into some of the work that Dr. Kirkland has done in regards to understanding literacy, understanding why certain approaches haven't really worked, understanding stereotypes and what happens there. Why did you want to bring Dr. Kirkland in on Friday?
Well, Dr. Kirkland is a foremost expert in literacy, and especially for populations like those affected in Rochester. And so you mentioned his previous book, A Search Past Silence. He actually has a forthcoming book called Pedagogy of the Black Child, which we're really excited about, where he focuses on dignity in education. But Dr. Kirkland is one of the leading experts in culturally relevant and responsive standards. In fact, he architected and authored the state standards for New York State on culturally responsive ed. So he's one of the leading voices in this field.
Dr. Kirkland, before we kind of work through some of the, for example, some of the ELA numbers, that those are the kind of things that get the public's attention or really kind of raise the community-wide concern. But just understanding the dynamics of how we teach, are we doing it better in New York State as far as you know? Are we doing it better in Rochester? Are we doing it better as a society, in your own sort of professional opinion about how we address literacy for starters?
Well, I think when we talk about vulnerable students and vulnerable student populations, we've struggled. We've struggled across the board. And I think this is a global struggle. It's something that we're trying to figure out. We know a lot about human development. We know how to teach kids. The question is, who do we regard as human, and how can we begin to shift narratives that have been static about vulnerable populations? And the thing that, I enjoy about the State of Our Children report card is that it sets a vision for a future where all 11,000 young people in our care are on a path to success, a future where we have the power to invent it, right? There's a saying by an American computer scientist, Alan Kay. He says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And the question is, there's a question about boldness and possibility, less about science than it is about aspiration. If we get stuck in a narrative of, kind of like descriptive quantitative statistics, I believe that we'll be discouraged from what we can do. We know also the best way to predict the future beyond, inventing it is joining each other and doing it together. The African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that is a theoretical approach that we have to apply to the problem of education in the education of vulnerable people across New York State, and certainly within Rochester.
So let me give a little bit of snapshot of the numbers with that caveat that David Kirkland just gave us, which is that you know, the numbers maybe tell you a story, and we should listen, but there is a lot of context that matters here. That's not me, again, that's not me running interference for a district or a community that isn't where it needs to be. But some of the context, and I'll start with math as an example. So I mentioned off the top here that the math numbers, they kind of popped to me. Then again, I thought when I was growing up, I really wasn't a math kid, So I don't know what it means, the difference between, hey, kids have different strengths. Maybe not everybody's a math kid versus, okay, here's in the most recent data for the academic year in Rochester, 8th grade math proficiency, all students, 3.8%, which is up from the previous year, 1.5%. So it's more than doubled, and it's still, it's 3.8. I mean, that's 1 in 25 kids, less than 1 in 25 kids proficient in math. So let me just start with math. When I hear that number, Brian, what did you think when you see numbers like that?
It's concerning. But it's something that the students have also told us is concerning. It's something the parents have also told us is concerning. And so, as Dr. Kirkland mentioned, it's not like there's a stasis around this. It's not like there's an acceptance or embrace of where we are. We're being futuristic. We collectively as a community have decided that we are not going to stop at where we are, but we want to stretch to where we know we can be.
What about you, Sebring Johnson, CEO of Edceptional? That math proficiency number of 3.8%, what does it mean to you?
So first and foremost, it means 96% are not proficient in mathematics at the 8th grade level. Now, admittedly, my undergrad degree is in applied mathematics, so I'm biased toward mathematics. But I must say this, I don't believe we fix the math problem until we fix the literacy problem. And so we have to be tunnel vision in that way. Literacy is the foundation of learning. And so if we deal with that in dogged fashion, then we'll see math scores go up as well.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. What do you think, Janice Poor, about that math number? What stands out to you?
It is a low number, but I think as we work towards educating our parents about the issue, then they're able to come to the table and, work with the scholars to kind of get that level up. So it's about education and awareness. If we don't know what the problem is, we can address the problem.
Yeah, Dr. Kirkland, when we think about these numbers, these scores, there's math, there's ELA, there's kindergarten readiness. We'll talk about all of those. If we do them in silos, we don't really have the opportunity to kind of connect, as Sebring Johnson just told us, the value of knowing that literacy affects math scores. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about the way we should be contextualizing some of that?
Yeah. So when we look at math scores, one thing that I think is powerful that you said is that math scores in Rochester are going up. One of the biggest gaps that we see across education, particularly education within vulnerable communities, is this crisis of optimism. We believe and we've clung to this narrative that failure, is static, that failure is something that we cannot change. And yet our young people are proving us wrong every time. That their numbers are going up, which means that they can increase even more. If it went up, 100% last year, it can go up 100% this year, and we can have 6%. And then the next year we can have 12%. There's a possibility deficit when it comes to the education of our babies. And that's what we have to cling to. To me, what the report says is that we recognize that we have a long way to go, yet we can get there together. Now, what does this say about literacy? What does it say about math? It's a recognition that there is a need that's been entrusted to us, and it's up to us to grab hands and do the things that we need to do in education and beyond it together.
So listeners, if you want to join the conversation this hour, a lot of ways to do that. We mentioned the YouTube chat if you want to do that. It's the phone number to call if you want to call the program toll free. It's 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255. It's 263-WXXI if you call from Rochester, 263-9994, or email the program connections@wxxi.org. All right, I'm looking at kindergarten readiness. The latest kindergarten readiness numbers, all students, 45.5%. Brian, generally, what does it mean to be kindergarten ready?
So in Rochester, we use the RECAP report, which is administered by our partners at the Children's Institute. And so they have a comprehensive assessment that includes early childhood screens, developmental screens, to make sure that when a 6-year-old enters kindergarten here in Rochester, they are kindergarten ready. So that 45% means that they've passed those metrics of all those screens.
And I'm thinking about what Sebrin Johnson was telling us. So that means 55% not kindergarten ready. They may be going to kindergarten, not kindergarten ready. And then what happens?
And so that means that kindergarten teachers have the added burden of lifting kids up to the appropriate grade level in order to be on level with their peers. So it is paramount. And this is why I'm just so happy with the work we're doing with Rock the Future Alliance. It's paramount that charter school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they are pairing with pre-K education teachers to make sure that the curriculum that's given in pre-K is in alignment with where you're going to be going in kindergarten. I think only then, when the two of them working together, that you'll find some great results.
Okay. Janice Poor, anything you want to add to 45% kindergarten ready? What do you think when you see that number?
I think that's a good number. It's a good start. We're on the right path. But then again, as a parent, if you know that your child is not kindergarten ready and you have that support and you know what to look for, you're able to actually do what it takes to get that child to the level that they need to be at. So it's a team approach. It's not just, a one-person fix for this.
And Brian Lewis, I want to ask you a little bit about a part of the report that I just want to make sure I understand this. There's a section in which you talk about the RCSD renewing efforts to fill every pre-K seat.
That's right, yeah.
And so I'm going to read from this, and then I want to ask you, how we're doing with this.
Sure.
From your report, thanks to a year-round recruitment and advocacy campaign, RCSD has made significant improvement in enrollment compared to prior years. This is pre-K.
That's right.
And so then you have the goals that were set for, I think, this school year, 24-25.
That's right.
So fill all preschool seats by October 2nd. Did that happen?
Yes. Well, yes, it did. And that goal is set by our partners at Early Childhood RCSD, Dr. Eva Thomas and her team, in collaboration with other partners in the community. And the answer is yes.
Okay. Attendance outreach for 3- and 4-year-old students with chronic absenteeism. How's that going?
We're making some progress with chronic absenteeism, right? And so again, the goal here is to baseline where we are with chronic absenteeism in our community. And as Dr. Kirkland mentioned, this is not only a Rochester-specific issue. We see chronic absenteeism as a challenge, especially post-COVID, across the nation. But we are seeing some gains in our chronic absentee numbers and seeing them reduced.
Preschool and kindergarten vertical alignment teacher meetings. Do we know if those are happening?
Dr. Thomas and her team do, and so unfortunately we did not bring them on the show today, but they will be able to share that information. They've been great
I suspect
partners,
we'll learn
yeah.
more Friday.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then encouraging principals to have a kindergarten readiness day at every elementary school. Anything you want to add there?
That, as far as I'm aware from Dr. Thomas's sharing and her partnership, that work is continuing to progress, which is really exciting.
Sebrin, you're nodding along there. You want to add something there?
Well, it's vitally important right now, and again, not to engage in binary conversation, but right now, 40% of every kindergarten seat is a charter school seat. We are invested fully in what goes on in pre-K, and it is to our interest. It's to the city's interest. If RCSD is doing those things that Brian is talking about now, we applaud that. And charter schools must do the same thing. You must make sure that you engage with pre-K environments to make sure that you're getting the best quality student and provide support for those who lag. And so I think we have that in common, whether you're talking RCSD or charter, it's our kids.
Can I say also, Evan,
Yeah.
the kindergarten readiness rate is a lagging indicator. It's what's known as a lagging indicator. So we're always kind of looking at a view shot of the past to see where our kindergarten ready students are. But there are certain leading indicators that are predictive of that lagging indicator, such as preschool enrollment, Head Start enrollment. I heard you had ABC on the program yesterday.
Yep.
They're a really critical partner. And so we know, and the data tells us, not only in Rochester, but all over the country, if you can enroll your child in Head Start, pre-K, or any kind of congregate setting where they're getting those skills and those supports that Janice was talking about, you are more likely to have a child that's kindergarten ready.
Janice, do parents generally, again, every household's different, every family's different. Are you comfortable that parents know about the opportunities for pre-K, for Head Start that are out there? Are they utilizing those opportunities?
I think there's more awareness of the opportunity that are available. But then again, when you look at transportation and accessibility to those programs, with those support, I think parents are able to access those programs a little more frequently or often now that it's out there. So again, it's just a push to get parents to understand that yes, kids can be in school by 3 and 4. They don't have to meet all the metrics or the standards, but if they're in those seats, then we're able to team up with partners and other organizations and stuff to get them ready. So when they are in kindergarten, they have developed some skills or they're at that benchmark.
In a moment, we're going to get to those ELA numbers, and we'll talk about what they mean. I'm sure Dr. Kirkland will have a lot to add in regards to how literacy is taught and where we are right now. Let me grab a phone call. Shirley in Rochester wants to join the conversation. Hi, Shirley. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. Sure. I wanted to ask Janice, what kinds of resources are available to you to do your job as a parent in this work? Decades ago, I was the coordinator for something called the Union of Parents, and we were trying to establish a citywide group of parents to be a voice at the table, as you said. So I'm wondering, what kind of resources are available to you? Do you have a team that you work with? Do you have a budget? Do you have staff or something to help you do your work?
Well, we're primarily, as PCAM member, we're primarily stationed with Rack the Future. However, there is an alliance that Rack the Future has with over 15 organizations. So each and every one of those organizations play a role in what we do as PCAM members. So they're there for support when we have questions or we have suggestions. The alliance is able to take that information and work within the individual organization to also do the work.
And so I just want to make sure I understand. So I understand that you have that the Rock Alliance has connections with other organizations. Do you, as a parent representative, have materials, a budget, a team available to help you reach out and engage and inform other parents across the district?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, there's a family and community engagement team of backbone staff. And so the backbone are the full-time professional staff that support our parents, but the parents are really leading. And the parents, we pay stipends to our parents. We make sure that they have childcare. We make sure that they have their other material needs met so they can really focus on the leadership. And they do also lead budgeting. We have participatory budgeting as well. So there's a key role that parents play in leading this work.
All right. Thank you very much.
Shirley, before you go, can I just ask you, with the parent union experience you had, what stood out to you? I mean, clearly, you were concerned enough to want to get that parent voice, and I wonder what's top of mind for you to make sure that they have that voice in 2025.
I think that there have to be ways for parents to connect with each other, because there's a wealth of knowledge, experience, information available among parents. And so that's why I'm curious as to how Janice is able to engage parents. So that's what stands out to me, that there's a need for parents to come together, to hear each other, to get information, to resolve problems without a lot of, outside assistance, if you will.
Yeah, and I would add we have about 50 parents that are part of PCAN, and they come from all walks of life, all background, and all experiences. So we're able to really utilize their experiences and what they have gone to do. These are parents who have gone through the system, have kids in elementary school all the way up to high school. So we are able to utilize their skills in different aspects of the work. Some parents who are more into the elementary scholars might be on one of our subcommittees, which is the Whole Child Network. And then we have parents who are in high school who are working on a high school team. So it's a collaboration with parents who are in different spaces.
I want to say to listeners, you're going to be able to see this report Friday. It's publicly released on Friday, I think, Brian.
That's right. It'll also be live streamed. The event will also be live streamed.
So the event is coming up Friday. You can tune in on the live stream. The report will be available. You ought to check it out. And one thing that definitely stood out to me is, again, while no one thinks the numbers are where they need to be, there's this little sort of this slow upward march, and then you see the pandemic. It is very clear. And by now, there's just not any doubt that the pandemic just hammered school districts that are under-resourced, that are struggling. Kids lost a lot of learning connection, parent involvement. I mean, I don't think that's controversial anymore. Do you, Brian? I mean, that's part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, that's universally understood, and across systems, our charter systems, our RCSD systems. Yes.
You want to add to that, Sebrin? You saw the same?
Absolutely. There's no question that we saw the effects of the digital divide. We saw the effects of parents and jobs and just the stress. And as it hit parents, it hits kids as well.
That's how, when you're at 3.8% math proficiency, and that's more than double the previous year, you got the slow rise and then boom, down, and now it's trying to work its way back up. After we take this only break of the hour, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about ELA. We're going to talk about literacy. We will talk about some of the numbers. We'll talk about what Dr. Kirkland is bringing as the keynote speaker to this event with the Rock the Future Alliance that's happening on Friday. Their annual State of Our Children report card comes out then. We've reviewed an advanced copy. We're talking about the numbers and where things are with our kids in this community. Not good enough, but they're trying to move them in a much better direction. We'll come right back with our guests next. This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. So let me read the third grade English language arts proficiency in Rochester. All students, the current number, proficient in English language arts, ELA proficiency by third grade, 15%. That is up from 11.3% the previous year. But if you go back to the last year before the pandemic, it was up toward 20%. So there was this hollowing out that happened. And now, once again, we see that trend up, down sharply, now working back up. But it's only 15%. So let me just start with some context from our guests in studios, and then I want to talk to David Kirkland about how he sees it anyway, ELA numbers. Brian Lewis, 15% ELA proficiency by third grade. What do you see there?
Like you said, Evan, I see a trend upward, and I see that there are a lot of great literacy interventions, some local and some, happening across our state and across our nation that are working. We highlight one in our report card. There's a great organization called Freedom Scholars doing some really powerful and impactful work. And so we have an evidence-based approach being advanced by our partners at the RCSD. We have some great literacy intervention being led by our partners at the charter schools locally, and I'm sure Sebrin could talk more about that. And so we have some literacy work that is very effective and that is working. Now we need to bring those to a population level scale.
Okay, Sebrin Johnson, CEO of Edceptional. You want to add to that?
Sure. Glass half empty, 85% of the young people are not reading on grade level. Glass half full. That upward tick shows what we claim every single day, that all of our babies can learn. Every single one of them can learn. And so if we look at that then and say there's a way to teach reading, there's a way for them to really find that proper instruction. And so if we have culturally responsive approaches to teaching the science of reading, implementing that in a responsible way, that kids can see not only reading material that represents them, but also do the teachers actually believe that I can learn, that I'm worth teaching, that I can go the extra mile if they go the extra mile. All of that is actually part of the literacy intervention process. And what's great about that, we took a school last year, I spoke with Brian about this, we took a school last year that was, we gave them baseline testing in September last year, 9% reading proficiency, 9%. We worked with them, and in 1 year's time, targeted learning methodologies there, they moved up 27 percentage points in 1 year.
How'd you do that?
We made sure that we looked at each student. It was like giving each student an individualized learning plan. We knew when they weren't doing well, they weren't tracked into another program. We gave them the resources to bring them up. We made sure that reading wasn't only about fluency, but it was about real comprehension. But we let the kids know, we know you can do this. And you are going to get this. And when you breathe that into individuals, particularly those from marginalized communities, everyone's told them they can't do it. But when you tell them they can do it and you stay there day after day after day, what they say is impossible, we find is quite possible.
Janice, what do you see in that number?
Positive. And I think, again, like both Brian and as you said, it's just working with the parents, working with the teachers, but really trying to believe in our kids, right? if we don't believe in our kids, then everything else just seems to be pointless. So I think it's coming out of the pandemic and having that hope that, yes, they can do it. What do they need? And giving them that resource to actually do it.
Well, there's a second part of this that I want to turn to Dr. David Kirkland, who's on the line with us. He's the author of, among other publications, a forthcoming book, but a book that's, I think it's around 10 years old now, A Search Past Silence, The Literacy of Young Black Men. I have not had a chance to finish reading that, but I want to quote from some of the book's forward that kind of lays out how society tends to view problems like this. And then we're going to let Dr. Kirkland tell us how he views this issue and maybe how districts and systems can do it differently. I'm going to set this up this way. We talked about kindergarten readiness in Rochester. It's around 45%. The lowest individual category of kindergarten readiness are male African-American students, 41.7%. That's the lowest number. So we just talked about third grade ELA proficiency, 15% overall in the district. But if you break it down among, again, individual groups, Black males is at the lowest with Latino males, girls doing better in each category, but white students are at 35% proficient, Latinos about 11%, Black students just under 13%. And the reason I share that context, let me read from the foreword of Dr. Kirkland's book. Quote, "By now the abysmal patterns and statistics are so well known that they no longer evoke a sense of shock or disbelief. Black male youths are overrepresented in every educational category associated with failure, such as suspension and expulsion rates, dropout rates, special ed placements, etc. And they are underrepresented in every category associated with educational success. The patterns emerge early, even as early as preschool, and foreshadow those associated with adult Black males. Like their youthful counterparts, adults can be struggling too." And then it goes on to say some of the advocates have figured out that the only way to reach Black males is to stop pathologizing them and treating them as crippled objects who need to be saved. They understand that the real work involves providing guidance and support, but also opportunities for young men to develop self-discipline and skills that foster leadership. It also means helping them in finding their voice, end quote. So Dr. Kirkland, there's a lot there, and I want to give you some space to talk about those themes, and then tell us what you see in the numbers of 15%, just under 13% ELA proficiency for Black students in third grade. What do you see there?
Yeah. Thank you for some time. I read the report, quite differently. I don't read the report as necessarily a damnation on our young people or our communities. Our babies aren't broken, but too often the systems we send them to are. And what I see is a reflection of a system that has not been designed to work well for particular young people. In fact, in Rochester, it's not clear to me that it works well for all of our young people. And what the report says to me is that there's a lot that we can do to help. Right? It says that, those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, that we can grab hands and do things in order to design systems that our students don't only deserve, but also deserve our students. This is why I see things a little bit differently. I would never say a 5-year-old is not ready for school. But I will say some schools aren't ready for our 5-year-olds. And that's a different position and articulation of what the issues are in education. Right? When I read the report tells me let's not reflect on the past, but let's see it as a blueprint for a future where we do create an education environment for our baby where every child thrives because we see them. Right? And so the literacy statistics, some of the quantitative visible data that we see, we can't see it as a reflection of people and communities. If we do so, we'll reinforce the existing problem, and that is a crisis of connection. But if we begin to see where the root of the problem lies, it's in a system that's not been well designed. And what the report says to me is that there's a lot that we can do to support that system in better serving our babies by getting more of them into early childhood education, by getting more of them to focus on things like the science of reading, not disconnected from a science of human connection, which means a culturally responsive and sustaining approach to education. And the key word in everything I just said is the we, and the power of possibility that we implies.
Dr. Kirkland, can you also talk a little bit in specific about the challenge? I don't know if that's the right word. I mean, I apologize for the clumsiness here, but the reality is the stats do show black males struggling more than black females, than white counterparts, and black young men and boys in particular might be stereotyped in different ways, might be viewed before they even set foot in a classroom different ways. What do you want to see change in schools and in sort of systemic approach there?
Yeah. Let me reframe that. I think the stats show that our systems struggle to serve young black men well. It also struggles to serve, kids across the board in Rochester well. It does a little bit better with some, but it's not doing well, with most. And so the question from a systemic approach, right, if we can kind of like shift that gaze, from saying that you're the problem to saying, hey, what can we do? And I like author the responsibility. We arrive at a completely different, kind of set of questions, right? So if the system does not serve young black men well, what can the system do better in terms of understanding literacy? One is to see them. Another is to create conditions that inspire them to read. We had in literacy programs, we had places where young men would just love to go to read. They were talking about sports statistics, and they were writing raps and reading raps, and they were talking about it like philosophers talk about big ideas. These are the kinds of designs that we create that transform education and educational environments for our young people. This is what Rock the Future Alliance is talking about. This is what the report is about. It's about how can we uplift what we know is possible in order to design the embrace around our babies so that they feel the hug, so that they feel the squeeze. How can we design a system that works for them?
Is it happening? I mean, do you see it happening enough?
Well, that's the aspiration of, the Rock the Future Alliance. It's telling us, it's challenging us, it's giving us a vision of what that might look like, right? There is a scripture that says, without a vision, the people perish. And the release of the State of Our Children report card sets a vision for a future where all 11,000 young people in our care can be placed on pathways of success. It's about what can we do for them, not how they must change to fit us.
Again, listeners, if you want to weigh in on some of this, we'll take your responses, 844-295-TALK. It's 844-295-8255, 263-WXXI if you're in Rochester, 263-9994. Robin in Rochester called in to say, School 17 has an awesome tutoring program to help kids learn how to read. It's called Help Me Read. Brian's nodding. I mean, there's a number of really good sort of ad hoc, sometimes parent groups and support groups out there. I guess the question is there going to be enough of them? But you're nodding along to that note from Robin there.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that program. It's a great one. I mentioned Freedom Scholars are also highlighted in this report. There's Rock Reads. There's Imagination Library, which is partnered with Rochester Education Foundation. I mean, there are some remarkable stories of programmatic interventions. You heard what Stephen said. There are schools and teachers, and there's example after example of working to improve literacy and having those systems reflect responsiveness, like Dr. Kirkland was just talking about. So we do have that happening in Rochester. We need to connect it. We need to align it to the places where there's the most need.
And Jacob in Rochester on the phone wants to weigh in. Hey, Jacob, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. As I applaud your energy and excitement for the future, but in Rochester, currently, we have approximately 66% of our families are single parent, and we just got voted in the top 5 most dangerous cities in the state with a factor of having 30+% poverty in our city. So how do we get to people who can't afford or are time stressed because most of our jobs are part-time? How do those parents and living under poverty that can't get to a charter school, how do they move ahead?
All right, so Jacob, I'll have to ask all of our guests if they want to weigh in. Thanks to producer Megan Mack, a little bit of information here. According to the United Way, this was from December 2019. Within the city of Rochester, 3 out of 5 parents are not married. 3 out of 4 children, 75%, live in unmarried family households. Nationally, unmarried households with children experience poverty at higher rates than the general population. And locally, that trend holds true. Again, reading from 2019, in Monroe County, unmarried households with children account for the largest subgroup of households living in poverty. Brian, I'll start with you. What would you say to Jacob?
Yeah, those are real systemic barriers. You know, I want to give a shout out to one of our closest partners who are also conveners and members of our alliance, RMAPI, the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative. They've done some work to address that specifically, including trying to increase minimum wage. So there's some policy solutions to some of those challenges, but those challenges are real. And we're working very closely with organizations like RMAPI, organizations like Together Now, organizations like Enterprise Community Partners to address those other challenges like economic challenges, housing. We have a really exciting partnership that we're going to be making some more traction on in this next year to try to eliminate homelessness in Rochester's children. Imagine that. Imagine if we can eliminate homelessness for McKinney-Vento students here in Rochester, what that will do for their education outcomes. So we those things are true, and we still have to have some audacity of hope to keep moving things forward.
Sebrin Johnson, CEO of Exceptional. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think we have to make sure that the North Star is always the kids. Understand that the statement we made that every single child can learn is true. When you tell me there are housing and security issues, yes, there are, and every child can learn. Are there mental health problems? Absolutely, and every child can learn. Does Rochester have a problem with poverty and crime? Yes, 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 and every single child can learn. And so when we come together as a community, and you mentioned RMAPI and others who are doing their part of that, it means that education professionals don't take your foot off the pedal. Every single child can learn. I'll just say quickly, one way to make sure that you reach every child is to understand that Black males, who make up the percentage we talked about before, they are not a monolithic community. And so we sometimes think that the way to teach Black men, Black boys, is to put in front of them only Black authors, but it's not a monolith there. And so Black kids also like Shakespearean sonnets. Black kids also like Greek tragedies. So don't assume you understand the Black way of learning because of the melanin in the person's skin. Understand that every single kid can learn, and we have a pathway.
Janice, what would you say to Jacob?
I would say, as a parent who is also in RCSD, and spend the last 26 years in this community as an immigrant, I think we really have to use the data in a positive way. Yes, we are, the community is in poverty, but that is a countrywide thing, it's a national thing. But knowing that data, when my child enters school, when my son enters school, that data shouldn't be used to penalize him. So I think removing some of those stereotypes, knowing that, yes, there is the possibility that this child might be coming from a family who is, in poverty or experiencing poverty or some situation, that shouldn't be used against that child to limit the ability to learn. So just coming into school, I think we should be more welcoming and knowing those data to use that to provide resources to family. The data is there. How can we help family? The only way to do that is to provide the resources.
Dr. Kirkland, I don't want to speak for the caller. I sense that Jacob feels like there has to be some kind of movement or messaging that leads to a society with fewer kids growing up in single-parent households. What that is, I don't know. Do you agree with that, Dr. Kirkland?
First, let me just thank the caller for their vulnerability and for sharing. I don't necessarily agree with it. I wish that everyone could live lives that they desire. Be it, single parents or non-single parents. People have, some people make choices, some don't. I wish people could live lives that they desire. But what I will say is that poverty is not a learning disability. And I will say that people who happen to not have material possessions matter, that worth is not based on how much you have, that your worth as a human being is self-evident. It just is, right? And because of that, We can together create classrooms where every child feels seen, valued, and inspired. We can redefine what it means to prepare young people for lives of dignity and purpose, regardless of their material status, that we can do so by ensuring that every child, every family, and every dream is not left behind. So I get it. Structural barriers exist. Systemic issues are there. Now what? Now let's grab hands. Let's figure out how to create the systems that bring us all up on terms that make sense to us.
I'm going to try to get as many calls as we can get in here. I did want to mention, before I come back to your phone calls, a number of listeners have pointed out, well, it's hard to teach when kids aren't in school, and attendance has been a big problem. And yes, it has, and our colleagues at WXXI, Noel Evans, and others have really done a great job reporting on this. The report does point to the success of Virtus High School. That's a public charter school for boys and young men. Virtus graduation rates, 79% in 2024, 86% in 2023, are viewed as an indicator that their approach is working, and the report says much of Virtus's success can also be credited to their laser-like focus on ensuring regular attendance. Let me ask Sebron Johnson, CEO of Edceptional, what does that mean? How is Virtus getting kids to attend school at higher rates?
Well, I take great pride in what Virtus is doing. I was part of the founding board for Virtus. Virtus does something close to what Dr. Kirkland mentioned a minute ago. Virtus does not say, why are the kids not attending school? Virtus says, what does the school need to do to make sure kids attend? And whatever has to be done, if we have to pick up the phone and call parents, we're going to pick up the phone to call. We're going to find out.
It's not what's wrong with them, it's what's wrong with us.
It's what's wrong with us. Okay. And adapt our system accordingly to meet the needs of those kids. They ask the question, are our start times wrong? Is the length of our calendar wrong? What can we do differently? How do we move you? And Virtus, by the way, is one of those schools who routinely get kids in the 9th grade at a 5th and 6th grade reading level. And we still say, and I say we as a charter sector, we still say we can graduate you and graduate you on time.
So if you can do this in a minute or less, I'm going to challenge you. For listeners who are hearing talk about Virtus or they hear the talk about charters, often this becomes this binary that you're for charters or you're against charters. And Sebron, you've said it's more complex than that.
Please, 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 let's stop having the binary conversations, district versus charter. It's one of the things that I think Brian and we just shake hands on all the time, that they're our kids, they're Rochester's kids. We need to be agnostic in terms of systems. I dream of a day when there's no need for charter schools to do this stuff. I want the RCSD to succeed. I just happen to be crazy enough to believe we could do it together.
Will you come back on a separate day and we'll just talk charters? We'll get a panel together. Will you come back and do that?
I'd love to.
All right, that's an invitation, because this is an important conversation, and too often it gets reduced to this, for or against. Let me grab Brian, who has been waiting. Hey, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question for Dr. Kirkland. Mm-hmm. I've seen articles that say that the ed schools aren't training teachers how to teach reading in accordance with the new science of reading. Do you see that as a big part of the problem?
And about 90 seconds, Dr. Kirkland, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that ed schools need to do a lot better job in helping teachers be prepared to go into situations where they can transform the experience for our young people. So we certainly can point at ed schools as a systems flaw that we need to transform. But I believe that, it's more than just the science of reading. We talk about the science of reading like it's a cure-all. There's a lot of good science that's come out of the science of reading. We also need the science of human connection. We need the science of reading to be taught in culturally responsive and sustaining ways. And we need teacher training to be better for our babies. Yes.
Brian, thank you for the phone call. And listeners, you've heard us talk about this in the last few years. The new president of the Rochester City School Board, Camille Simmons, is very much focused on the question of literacy, has cautioned us, just like Dr. Kirkland did, not to just oversimplify to, are you doing phonics or are you not doing phonics? Are you doing science or reading or not? But it does matter. And it's not just a one or the other. Charters are not charters. Phonics are not phonics. but it's a component that really matters, and we will be talking much more about that with the new president of the school board very soon. I appreciate the question, Brian. And as we wrap the hour, Brian Lewis, Executive Director of Rock the Future Alliance, got a big day on Friday. The report card officially drops on Friday. Dr. Kirkland's coming to do the keynote. What do you want to leave with listeners here?
It's a big day for our community, Evan. I mean, this is our community's metrics. These are our community's children. So we're working together, as Sebrin mentioned. This is a collaborative effort, and we're proud of the partnership that we're advancing to put our young people on the path to upward mobility.
Rock the Future Alliance has a number of layers to it, and one of them is the Rock the Future Alliance Parent Engagement Collaborative Action Network. I'm sure they'd love to get more parents involved. There's ways to reach out. We'll have that information about what they're doing in our show notes if you'd like to do that. I want to thank our guests who've been here. Brian Lewis, thank you for making time for the program.
Thank you.
Thank you to Sebrin Johnson, CEO of Edceptional.
Thanks so much, Evan.
We'll see you soon. And Janice Poor is co-chair of the Rock the Future Alliance Parent Engagement Collaborative Action Network. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. David E. Kirkland, thank you for the expertise and the time this hour.
Thank you so much.
And the State of the State with Governor Kathy Hochul is our second hour today. Thank you for listening. We're back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.